Welcome and thank you for joining us today for day one of our live virtual MDA Engage ALS Symposium. My name is Michelle Barrios and I am a community education specialist at MDA. We are thrilled to have you join us today for this important educational symposium. Today's symposium is part of our larger MDA Engage community education series, which focuses on providing relevant and responsive information for the neuromuscular disease community from subject matter experts. Be sure to visit the MDA Engage section on mda.org for updates on upcoming virtual education events. We would not be able to provide these educational programs without the support of our generous sponsors. I would like to thank Biogen, Cytokinetics, Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma America, Apellis, Ionis, and Hillrom, now part of Baxter, for supporting the ALS program. I would also like to thank their representatives who are in attendance today. Following the event, you will receive an email that will provide some additional educational materials from some of these companies. So be on the lookout for an email from MDA Engage at mdausa.org. Now, I have a few housekeeping items to go over before we begin our symposium today. We are recording today's event and will be posting it to the mda.org website for on-demand viewing to ensure that those who are not able to join us live today are able to access this information. Please know that all phone lines have been muted. We will be having a question and answer session at the end of each presentation. Be sure to utilize the Q&A window to type in your questions. If you hover over the bottom of your screen, a tray of webinar icons will appear. Click on the Q&A bubble to open the window and enter your question. You do not need to wait until the Q&A session to chat in your questions. As questions come up along the presentation, please feel free to send those in. We encourage attendees to communicate with others by utilizing the chat feature throughout the day. If you want to say hi, share a bit of your story with others who are on the line, or have a question on something outside of the topics we will discuss today that you would like to obtain suggestions from the community, please use the chat feature. Simply click on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen and enter your comment to other attendees. Feel free to use this throughout the day to connect with others. You will notice on the agenda that there are small breaks between some speakers. Please feel free to stay connected to the live broadcast during these times, but this will also allow you time to grab some water or a bite to eat throughout the day. You will also be able to log in and out throughout the broadcast. Finally, we will be sending out a brief survey at the end of today's symposium and would like to receive your feedback on what you heard today. We strive to discuss topics that are of interest to you, and we use your feedback as a way to improve future educational programming. So thank you in advance for taking the time to complete the survey post-event. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker of the day, Mark Fisher. Mark Fisher is the Director of Advocacy Engagement at the Muscular Dystrophy Association. In this role, Mark leads MDA's Grassroots program and advocacy volunteer efforts. He works to empower advocates and connect them with key decision makers in order to advance public policies that improve the lives of the neuromuscular disease community. He previously served as the Digital Grassroots Manager at the American Heart Association, and was also a field organizer on a U.S. Senate campaign. Mark earned his Master of Public Policy from American University and is originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thank you, Mark, for being here today, and I will let you take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here today to kick off this symposium. I'm very excited. So let me just go ahead and share my presentation with everybody, and then we will get going. So hi everyone, thank you for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate that, Michelle. My name is Mark Fisher. I'm the Director of Advocacy Engagement here at MDA. And I'm thrilled to be here to talk a little bit about our advocacy program and some of our public policies that we're working on that we think will really benefit the entire neuromuscular community, including the ALS community. So as Michelle said, feel free to put some questions in the chat box as you go. I definitely have time at the end for Q&A and happy to answer any questions I can. So here's a little overview of what we'll be chatting about today. First of all, why does MDA even advocate? Why do we get into the legislative arena? And then a little overview of some of our advocacy priorities, especially those geared to the ALS community. Some recent victories that we've had, and then ways for you to get involved. Hopefully today throughout the presentation, there'll be a few things that you might hear that will perk your interest a little bit, that will make you get excited. And if there's something there, I hope that happens and you can let me know. But I'll show you how you can get involved with us after we are done talking today. And then of course, I'll take any questions you have. So first, why does MDA lead advocacy efforts? I always like to begin this way. I think many folks might be surprised that a nonprofit like MDA even gets involved in the legislative process. It might be seen as a little kind of too sticky. You know, there's obviously some politics and there's some basic controversy when we talk about what happens in Washington, D.C. But the short answer is we have to if we really want to fulfill our mission of transforming the lives of people affected by neuromuscular diseases, including ALS. If we really want to live up to this, we really want to have an impact, we have to get involved in these advocacy efforts. You know, we have to really transform the lives of people living with ALS, we have to make sure that the FDA works in a way that we can get therapies out quicker. We have to make sure that healthcare is affordable and accessible to everyone, including people living with ALS. And then, of course, we have to make sure that they can be free to travel and airline travel can be easier than it is now. So we have to make sure all these things combine together if we really want to live up to this promise. And to do that, we need to use advocacy and we need to make sure that public policy is aligned with this goal. And that's where me and my team come in. Hopefully you can come in as well. So we have three, we call them advocacy pillars. You can call them buckets, you can call them categories, whatever you like to call them. Three main areas of advocacy that we work on. And a lot of the policy work on that affects the ALS community can fit in all three of these. So first is access to care and therapies from day one. That is just our, you know, from the moment of diagnosis, that we want to make sure that the care and therapy is there, that needed care and therapy is there. I'll go into more details of this in a second. We also then focus a lot on accelerating therapeutic development, making sure drugs get to market quicker, therapies get to the market quicker than they are now. And then empowerment and independence, making sure that those living with ALS or any condition that MDA covers can live a life free of discrimination and can live an empowered life. So I'll go over all these buckets in a second and let you know what specific policies we're working on. But that's what we do in a nutshell. So I want to talk about some victories we had in the last few years that I wanted to share. We have made lots of progress over the last few years, and I wanted to share some of the progress we've made public policy-wise to show that our grassroots volunteers really do make a difference, and they really are heard on Capitol Hill and can push some positive results. So here are just a few that I think really can be relatable to folks living with ALS. First, under access and care and therapies, we fought and we continue to fight really hard to protect pre-existing condition protections. Those came about in the Affordable Care Act, and there was a Supreme Court case up last year that, if went the wrong way, could have really gutted these pre-existing condition protections. Luckily, that didn't happen. Luckily, the Supreme Court threw out the case, but we were very active in there to make sure that those pre-existing protections were that they remain and they continue to be in law. We really want to increase insurance affordability. During the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a few bills that were passed that increased the amount of subsidies and tax credits that people could access to afford healthcare. We want to make sure those don't go away and they become more permanent. One that happened just last year was the ALS Disability Insurance Access Act. That is a mouthful, I know. You'll learn that a lot of these bills' names are mouthfuls, but that one is one of them. But really what this did was this removed the 5-month waiting period for Social Security disability insurance benefits for those people living with the ALS. A lot of times they had to wait 5 months before they could access those benefits. That is something that needed to change. and we're able to work to get that to change. So that's not a problem anymore. Folks can access those benefits right away, which is a great victory. Under accelerating therapeutic development, this is probably the big marquee bill that we got passed last year, which is the Act for ALS. You can see President Biden there signing the bill just right before the holiday season last year. And this bill is really, we hope it will be a game changer. It does a few things. First, it expands access to experimental therapies for ALS patients who couldn't enroll in clinical trials. We know and we've heard loud and clear that sometimes getting in ALS clinical trials can be a problem. It can be difficult. But we still want to make sure that folks can access those experimental therapies. So this bill would expand that access to make sure folks can receive these, they have greater access to these experimental therapies. It also invests in more neurodegenerative research, including ALS. And then it also created a public-private partnership to speed up development of therapies for neurodegenerative diseases, especially ALS. So in total, this bill's goal is to accelerate much-needed therapies. It just passed, again, right before the holidays last year, but it's seen as a really, really big victory. We've seen some momentum on reforms for drug development. I'll go into that in a second. And then under empowerment and independence, we've been making progress on accessible air travel, which I'll go through in a second. These are the ones that I thought would resonate the most with folks on the webinar today. We've definitely have had a few more victories in other parts of our advocacy work, but I thought these might be the most relevant to folks on the call. So what's our priority this year? Now, this is a screen with quite a bit of priorities. We have quite a few that we're working on this year. And I won't go over all these because I'll go over a few of them in detail as we go on, but I wanted to just put this on the screen to show what we're working on this year. And it's a lot. So what I'm hoping for today is if hopefully one or two of these might perk your interest or perk your ears that maybe you want to learn more about or help us advocate on Capitol Hill or in Washington, D.C. We would love to have you. I'll show you how you can do that in a second. But this is our 2022 agenda. It's quite expansive. Not everything here is 100% relatable to folks living with ALS, but a lot of it is. And I'm really hoping something here perks your interest. So let's dive in what public policies we'll be working on this year. The first one, this is everything. I'm just going to go over some highlights in the middle of the screen. Again, I talked about this before, which is we're going to be working to improve access to quality and affordable healthcare. That's really going to be one of our main issues for quite a while. We really want to make sure, again, those tax subsidies to help people afford health insurance, at least on the private market, remain. We want to do work to expand Medicaid coverage. So there's a lot of different policies we're working on to improve access to quality and affordable healthcare. This one under that is one that came kind of right out of the pandemic, which is telehealth. Because of the pandemic, the government was able to temporarily ease some of the hurdles and barriers in telehealth to really expand it across the country really, really quickly. We've seen really good results out of the expansion of telehealth, and we're hoping to codify or put some of those temporary easements into permanent law. We don't want them to go away. We want them to be permanent because many people have taken advantage of telehealth, and we want to make sure it's there for the long term. So we're working on some telehealth bills. And then this is one that really cuts across a lot of people, which is the home and community-based care expansion. We've heard loud and clear, we know loud and clear that getting access to home healthcare aids, equipment, any sort of getting access to care in the home is a really big struggle and a challenge. So this is something that we've really ramped up our work in to really try to improve this because we know it's really, really hard to get those home healthcare aides or get those care attendants that are just desperately needed. So that's becoming a bigger issue in this bucket. On the right there, you can see a graphic. We did a whole webinar about accessing care in the home. I'll put a couple links at the end of the presentation, but you can watch a whole webinar we did about all the policies that we're working on to improve that. Under accelerating therapeutic development, again, I talked about Act for ALS. It passed right before the holidays. Now we have to make sure that it is implemented successfully. It's a major victory to get a bill passed, but if it's not implemented correctly, it won't have the desired effect. So we're making sure it's funded, which it got funded last fiscal year. We're hoping for more funding this year. And we want to make sure those programs start successfully, especially that program that expands access to more experimental therapies. We want to make sure that that program gets off to a good and solid start. So we're working really hard to get that to happen. We also want to innovate clinical trials and FDA reforms. We've heard this loud and clear that especially for rare diseases or those with folks living with ALS, getting into clinical trials is challenging. And we want to do the best we can to make them innovative. We want to make sure that the patient voice is heard more than it is now in clinical trial and clinical trial design. And we just kind of want to reform some of the ways that FDA does its clinical trials. We're doing that through this year. There is Congress every 5 years has to basically approve FDA's ability to collect user fees. And when you have something like that, like a must-pass bill, that's our chance to get some reforms in. And we're working to do that this year. And then medical research is always going to be something that's really important to us. Specifically at the National Institutes of Health, we want to make sure that that government agency is properly funded. We've seen year after year increases in its funding. We want to continue that. And then there actually is a specialized ALS research program at the Department of Defense, and we want to make sure that is properly funded as well. If you're interested in this topic, there's a webinar we did in February about unlocking treatment development for rare neuromuscular diseases, and it kind of goes into what we're looking to do in this realm, if this is interesting to you. Finally, empowerment and independence. I spoke about this before, but we know air travel is a nightmare. We know it's a nightmare for anyone living with a disability or anyone who needs to take care of someone who might have a disability or just trouble moving in and out of an airplane. We know how hard that is. And we're working really hard through multiple channels to improve it. So there's a bill called the Air Carrier Access Amendments Act. That's another mouthful. That what we're looking to support, which would improve air travel. The Department of Transportation is considering some regulations to help improve air travel, including right now they're looking to issue regulations to improve the accessibility of lavatories on single aisle aircrafts. That's something we're actively collecting comments on right now. So if that interests you, we can connect you and you can be able to send your comments about how you can improve, how DOT can improve those lavatories, because we know it's a big hurdle. And then finally with here, we're working with the US Access Board to achieve what everyone wants to achieve, which is allow people to just stay in their wheelchairs when on flight. Just be able to basically lock into the airplane, not even have to leave their wheelchair, because we know they get broken. We know that there can be issues transferring folks in and out of their wheelchair. And the way to avoid that is just allow people to stay in their wheelchairs altogether. So we're working, this is the holy grail, I like to say, and we're working really hard to make that a reality. We also know that there's still discrimination in the workplace. And we're trying to solve that through a few bills as well, including ones that would incentivize companies to hire people living with disabilities, to create tax benefits to modify their workplaces, but also make sure that folks get a competitive wage. In many states across the country, those living with a disability receive a sub-minimum wage, which we think is unfair and discriminatory and wrong, and we want to change that. We also know that the SSI system of income is wholly outdated, and we're working on a few bills that would update the supplemental security income program, because we know that is just an outdated program. We know that it disincentivizes people from working because they're afraid they might lose their benefits. So we're really working to fix that as well. And then finally, we're trying to get paid leave implemented. And many people who are caregivers really need some help in paid leave so they can take care of family members that they currently can't do now. If you're interested in air travel, we just had a webinar a few weeks ago talking about our efforts on that. And again, I'll put links to all this at the end of the presentation. You can watch what we're doing for that. So hopefully something there perked your interest. Hopefully one of those issues really perked your interest and you're willing to help us out. You know, we really rely on grassroots volunteers, people like you on the call, raising their voices with their members of Congress, urging them to make positive change. So if you want to join us, there's so many opportunities for you to make your voice heard. And the good news is no matter what you're comfortable with, no matter what time you have, there's something you can do. So the first thing is if you join our network, which you can do that two ways. You can go to mda.org/advocacy, or you can go and text MDA USA to 50457. Those are two ways that you can join us, and I'll repeat this at the end of the presentation. But you will receive timely email updates. They come from me, so it's literally me sending them to you about things going on in DC and ways for you to make your voice heard. Whether that's emailing your members of Congress on something that's moving now on Capitol Hill, or trying to get support for some bills on Capitol Hill. You're also able to tweet members of Congress as well. We also allow folks to take action on government agency regulations. That seems kind of wonky, but it's really important. A lot of public policy that gets done actually gets done at the agency level and not necessarily at the congressional level. So a good example is those accessible lavatories on airplanes. That sort of positive progress we hope to see will be done at the Department of Transportation, and they will be setting the regulations. So it's important that folks contact them and let them know what they think, and we are able to connect you to government agencies in that way. Educational webinars and trainings. Every slide before had a webinar that we did, but every month we do educational webinars called Advocacy Institutes, and they're on a whole variety of topics. You saw the one on FDA reforms, the one on accessible travel, the one on home health care. I'm going to preview one that we're doing in a couple weeks, just a couple slides over, but we've done them on, what are your employment rights? We've done them on accessible voting. We've done them on quite a few different topics, and they're about every month. So if you join our network, you will get invitations to those every month. And then you can obviously share your story with us, which is incredibly valuable, which I'll show in a second. You also will be able to, we provide opportunities for you to virtually meet your members of Congress. The slide in the upper right, the photo there was of our training for our first virtual lobby day last year. And we'll be doing another one this year, which I'll tease out in a second. But you can meet your members of Congress just like we're meeting now. It's just as effective as meeting in person. And hopefully next year we'll be able to do more in-person things than we can this year. But we do offer that to virtually meet your members of Congress on an issue that's important to you. You can always call your members of Congress. You can write on our MDA Quest blog, which I'll show you an example of just a second, and you can organize in your community. So as you can see, there's a lot of options for you to become a grassroots volunteer, no matter what you're comfortable with or no matter what your time that you have in your day is. But the first step is to join us, and you can do that at mda.org/advocacy. So just a few other things I wanted to highlight. First is the power of your story. Your story is the most important tool you have in your advocacy toolbox. The good news is you're an expert on your story. No one else is. So you are already an expert because you know what your life story is. And your stories are so powerful. I could go to Capitol Hill every day and talk to members of Congress about important issues, but sometimes it's that personal story from a constituent that can really move the needle. And that's what everyone on this call has, is their own personal story. And it really cuts through the noise on Capitol Hill, and they're so valuable. So two examples. The one on the left is an intern we had a few years ago named Josh, and he went to Capitol Hill actually in February of 2020, right before the world turned upside down, and shared his story with his members of Congress about bills that were important to him. And we really hope to start that back up again in person. And then on the right is a blog post by one of our great advocates, Gabrielle. She attended our first ever virtual Hill Day, and she wrote a blog post about her experience with that. So not only did she attend, she could write about her experience, and we would promote that. So a couple things I wanted to promote. First is we have an Advocacy Institute webinar coming next week. It's on Tuesday, May 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And this is where we're going to talk about that bill I talked about, Act for ALS, that really game-changing bill that passed before the holidays. And we're going to give everyone an update where it is implementation-wise, what's happening with it, where's the progress on it. We'll probably go over again what the bill does and let people know where it is and how that's going. And again, it's really vital for that to be implemented successfully if we can live up to the promise of that bill. So if you're able to join us on the 24th at 7 p.m., that would be great. We'd love to have you. I will put a RSVP link when we get to the Q&A part into the chat box so people can see it. Also, as I mentioned this before, we are having a virtual Hill Day. It's going to be the end of September, so September 28th and 29th. This is where we're going to bring quite a few advocates together to meet with their members of Congress online to talk about issues that are important to them. We're still, obviously, the details are still being worked out, but we want to get the save the date out there because we want to have a nice big showing, and we will provide training for folks who want to attend to make sure that they know how to go and share their story and how they make sure they're briefed on the bills and have a successful event. But if you're really interested in going that extra step with us and really want to meet your members of Congress and talk to them, please keep this date open, the 28th and 29th. If you join our Grassroots network, again at mda.org/advocacy, you will get an invitation to this. But hey, we're all together, why not give you a sneak peek? So this is a save the date for the 28th and 29th. We're really excited to put this together. So what can you do right now? An example, the good news is a lot. The first thing is sign up. That's the easiest way, is to go to our website. Again, I know I'm a broken record, but mda.org/advocacy, and you can sign up there. You can also text us at MDA USA to 50457. You also can just email me personally at advocacy@mdausa.org if you want as well. And then, on our website, again, that you see, you can take actions on some of these issues that might be important to you. Maybe it's improving home-based care, maybe it's improving air travel, or some of those economic independence bills. So, trying to eliminate workplace discrimination, a competitive wage, those type of issues I talked about. So you can take action right now. You literally go to our website, click on the campaign that really means a lot to you. Our website will automatically match you with your lawmaker based on your address. So if you're not sure who represents you, that's no problem. You type in your address and we match you automatically. And we'll give you even a sample letter that you can send or edit. So we really set you up for success right on our website. And then I'll put this in the chat box. But on May 24th, if you want to learn more about that Act for ALS bill, what it does, and where we are in implementing it, we would love to have you. So with that, I think a few things came in as I was talking in the chat or the Q&A. So we got a question about a little bit more on our involvement with expanded access programs. Yeah, that's a really good question. This is from Carla. So I will be really honest that that therapeutic development section is the bread and butter of my boss, Paul. It's not my bread and butter, that's his. But we are trying to essentially improve the expanded access program as it is now. Right now, as I said, with those user fee authorizations, it's really wonky. But as we try to make sure that the FDA can collect user fees again in that bill that's coming up in a couple months, we're really working to improve the expanded access program through that. So if you're interested in that, Carla, feel free to send me an email at advocacy@mdausa, and I can connect you to my colleague, Paul, who really will give you a much better answer than I will. But we're working to try to improve that. What is the general feeling in Washington? This is from David. What is the general feeling in Washington about telehealth? Is it an uphill battle or does it have widespread support? David, it's a good question. Everything in DC is not as simple as it seems. We think there's support for this. As I think everyone probably used telehealth a little bit more during the pandemic than they might have before. So we actually do think there is support for this. If everything in DC, it's about making sure the timing is right and making sure it's the right bill at the right time. But we're hopeful and optimistic because we think that everyone, no matter what party you're on, probably benefited from telehealth. So never say you can't guarantee anything in Washington, but this is something that we really think can get done. Jessica wants to ask about a little bit more about how MD is working to make clinical trial design more innovative. And is there anything that I can get involved in as a grassroots volunteer? So happy, Jessica, you mentioned this. So yes and yes. So again, we are submitting comments shortly. I wish they had them today, but they're not quite ready yet, to those in Congress who are working on that bill again to reauthorize FDA to collect user fees. It's so wonky, but it's really one of the only times we have to or from the FDA. And we're submitting our personal comments right now about what we want to see done in that final bill. And if you go to our website, you can see some of the comments we sent before. But Jessica, I can send you the comments we sent before, but we are actively involved in that legislation. Again, that's a purview of my colleague. And then once that bill gets kind of posted, or once that bill gets kind of ready for prime time, we'll then ask grassroots volunteers to take action on it. We're just not quite there. It's not quite crafted, ready for advocates to take action on it yet, but we're getting really, really close. So hopefully we have some news for there. Again, if you sign up for our list, you'll know when that's ready to take action on. I know that some of the airlines have been resistant to change. Are there any specific airlines that have made strides in accessibility? What I'll say for that is it's complicated with the airlines. You know, they are part of some of the working groups that we work with on accessibility. There's a working group at DOT that we're a part of, that other airlines are a part of, and we have been working together to make strides to make airlines more accessible. I don't think I can call it a specific airline. I don't know if I can do that, but airlines are at the table to make their airplanes more accessible. As you can imagine, those on our those like us and other groups who are really pushing for accessibility wanted this done yesterday. We wanted it done quicker than you bet the airlines probably do. But they're at the table, and we're trying to work together as much as we can to get that done. But yes, you can imagine that there might be a little bit of difference of opinions, but we have to work together in the meantime. So that's what we're trying to do. Autumn, I love this question. Why is the airline industry exempt from ADA requirements? It's a good question. So the answer is the ADA actually does not apply to the airlines. It's the only form of transportation that it does not apply to, which is really frustrating. So it applies to buses, it applies to trains, but does not apply to the airlines. And that's because the bill that does apply to airlines that was passed a while ago was done before the ADA. So folks thought they didn't need to include an airline bill because it was already passed. Well, that was so many years ago, it needs to be updated. So it is not part of the ADA. They are separate things, which can be frustrating. But yeah, it's the only transportation that is not covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we definitely have to come at the problem a little differently. It's a great question, Autumn. Thank you for asking. So I am going to put a few things in the chat. If you're interested in joining us for that Act for ALS webinar this Thursday, here is the link to that, to RSVP. We hope you can join us. So I just put that in now. If you're interested in our broad advocacy agenda, want to go a little bit more involved than maybe I was able to today, I encourage you to check out this blog we wrote about our agenda. You can go in a little bit more detail about it, and maybe there's something in there that really perks your interest. So that's a blog you can check out. And then finally, again, here's the URL to join our network. We would love to have each and every one of you join us in this effort that we're all doing together. So with that, I believe I'm right at time, Michelle. So thank you so much for having me. I loved being here. You can contact me at advocacy@mdausa.org, and I'm here for you. So thanks for having me.
That was perfect timing. Thank you so much, Mark from MDA's advocacy team.